Am I certain that I'm not certain about anything? The Christian froze. 3 seconds of silence, the kind that swallows a stadium whole. Because the Muslim had just landed a punch that shouldn't have been possible. A question so simple an 11-year-old could ask it, but so sharp it cut straight through 400 years of manuscripts, anonymous gospels, and everything the Christian thought he knew about certainty itself. One counter-question, one perfectly placed jab, and the whole fight just flipped. Let me show you how we got here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ring. In the red corner, weighing in with 14 centuries of tradition, the Muslim, the defender of the faith. He stands on the Quran's claim that no one has certain proof of the crucifixion of Jesus. His belief is clear. Allah saved Jesus, raised him up, and made it only appear that he was crucified. And in the blue corner, the Christian, a seeker with questions, holding the 4 Gospels as his shield and the crucifixion as the cornerstone of his faith. He believes Jesus died on the cross for the sins of the world, rose 3 days later, and that this event is the center of all history. Both men are respectful. Both men are earnest. But only one of them is about to realize he's been fighting with a weapon he can't fully trust. The bell rings. The Christian came with a question, a simple one. He'd been reading the Quran, specifically chapter 4, verse 157, and something bothered him. The verse says that those who argue about the crucifixion of Jesus have no certain knowledge. They're only following conjecture, guesswork, assumptions, things that feel true but aren't proven. So he asked, who's the Quran talking about? The Muslim didn't hesitate. It's talking about everyone who claims certainty about what happened to Jesus on the cross, but doesn't actually have it. And then the Muslim added the part that made the Christian's spine straighten. When I talk to Christians about the crucifixion, they come in very confident. But when we start looking at the actual evidence, the table turns. They realize they're not as certain as they thought. The Christian nodded slowly. He understood the words, but he didn't yet feel the trap closing. Because the Muslim wasn't talking about belief. He was talking about proof. And proof, as it turned out, was about to become a very big problem. The Muslim leaned in. Let me ask you this. Are you certain, absolutely certain, that Jesus was put on the cross and killed? Do you have undeniable proof? It was a fair question, a straightforward one, and the Christian gave an honest answer. I don't have absolute proof about anything. The words hung in the air. The Muslim blinked. Are you Christian? Yeah? Then why are you speaking like an atheist? The Christian smiled, a little awkward. He explained that he'd been reading philosophy, thinking about certainty, and he'd come to the conclusion that he couldn't be 100% sure about anything. Not history, not even God. The Muslim's eyes narrowed. Okay, so let me ask the million-dollar question. The arena went quiet. Are you certain that you're not certain about anything? The Christian paused. You could see his brain working through it. If he said yes, that he was certain he wasn't certain about anything, then he was certain about something, which meant his whole claim collapsed. If he said no, that he wasn't certain about his uncertainty, then he might be certain about other things, which also collapsed his claim. Either way, he just defeated his own argument. The Muslim let it land. That's called a self-defeating statement. If you say nothing is absolutely true, is that claim absolutely true? You can't make that claim without destroying it. There must be something foundational you're certain of. Your existence, maybe. Something. And from there, you can be uncertain about other things. But you can't reject certainty altogether. The Christian nodded. Okay, I can accept that. I guess I am certain about some things. But anything based on historical records or hearing from other people, or even my own experience to some extent, I can't be certain about that. The Muslim smiled. Good. So what makes you confident, not certain, but confident, that Jesus was crucified? What's your proof? The Christian took a breath. Well, we have the 4 Gospels. They all seem to agree. The Muslim raised a hand. Stop right there. Do we agree, the Muslim asked, that the 4 Gospels were written by anonymous authors? The Christian hesitated. For the most part, yeah, I think we can say that. Even evangelical Christian scholars admit that. Bruce Metzger, Daniel B. Wallace, Philip Comfort, these are the leading experts in textual criticism, the people who defend the Bible, and they all say the writers are anonymous. The Christian thought about it. I think for the sake of argument we can agree, though I do think there's contextual reason to believe John wrote John. The Muslim didn't let it slide. Who's John? Give me his full name. Where was he born? When did he die? What did his community say about him? The Christian opened his mouth, then closed it. John is just a first name, and that name was added later. Every scholar agrees on that. So when you say John wrote John, you're assuming we know who John was. But we don't. That's the whole point of calling them anonymous. The Christian shifted. But isn't that true of autobiographies in general? We only know people through their own writings. The Muslim shook his head. Not in Islam. We have something called the science of men. Every deed of information from the Prophet Muhammad comes through a chain of people, and we have the full biography of each person in that chain. What their community said about them, when they were born, when they died, all of it. So we can verify that the information is authentic. That's why we're certain about what we believe. Now, the earliest full manuscript we have of the Gospels is from the 4th century, nearly 400 years after Jesus. It's called the Codex Sinaiticus. You're welcome to fact-check me right now. The Christian didn't pull out his phone. The Muslim continued. The earliest fragment we have is called P52. It's as small as a credit card, from the Gospel of John, and it's over 150 years after Jesus. No important information on it, nothing you could base a belief on, just a random scrap. He leaned forward. So here's what you have. Gospels written by anonymous people, hundreds of years separated from the source, with no eyewitnesses. How is that proof of anything? The Christian tried to recover. I don't think just because the earliest manuscripts we have today are from 300 years later means that's when they were originally written. They're copies. Of course they're copies, but if you don't have the original, you don't know what was copied and what wasn't. And the people who copied them? Also anonymous. You can't trust anonymous copyists. He didn't stop. We have writings from church fathers as early as the 2nd century, like Origen of Alexandria, talking about how corruption by scribes had already spread far and wide. Scribes were changing the text out of arrogance. So when you have something written in the 4th century that's a copy of a copy of a copy by anonymous scribes, you cannot call that reliable. The Christian's confidence started to crack, but he wasn't down yet. But, the Christian said, those problems are true for ancient manuscripts in general. You could say the same thing about the Odyssey or writings by Aristotle. We don't apply this level of skepticism to other historical documents. The Muslim was ready. First, that's not true for the Quran or Islamic scripture. We have direct chains, known people, verified sources. So you can't say, this is how it is for everything. Second, we're not talking about whether Aristotle said something funny or whether Alexander the Great had certain habits. We're talking about your eternal salvation. If you're telling me that someone came to die for the sins of the world and my afterlife depends on it, I need absolute proof, not guesses. He pressed in. Let me ask you this. If someone wrote a book about your life 400 years from now, copied from unknown sources, and we had evidence that people were lying and changing stories about you, would you trust that book as an accurate description of your life? The Christian thought. I think if it aligned with all the other documents, no, forget other documents, just this one. Would that single document on its own be proof? The Christian paused. It would be evidence, not outright proof. Evidence for what? Can we rely on it as accurate? The Christian shook his head slowly. You can't rely on it absolutely. Exactly. The Muslim sat back. That's what the Quran is saying. You don't have certainty. You have conjecture. And now the Christian could feel it. The ground under him wasn't as solid as he thought. But the fight wasn't over, because the Muslim was about to go deeper. Let me add more. Every manuscript we have is corrupted to some extent. That's a statement from Daniel B. Wallace himself. Every single manuscript contradicts the others, and the changes weren't accidents. They were intentional. The Christian blinked. Intentional? Yes. Scribes found contradictions between the Gospels, like between Mark and Matthew, and they tried to harmonize them by changing the text. Wallace and other scholars say this openly. The Muslim didn't wait for a response. And the Gospel accounts themselves contradict each other about the crucifixion. Different days, different details. When the women came to the tomb, was there a rock? Was there an angel? Did the angel move the rock, or was it already gone? The stories don't match. The Christian tried to defend. I think that's like if you had a car accident and people remembered different details. One person says someone was wearing a red shirt, another says white. It doesn't mean the accident didn't happen. The Muslim shook his head. These aren't small details like shirt colors. These are major contradictions. One gospel says a person was there. Another says no one was there. One says there was a rock and an angel moved it. Another says there was no rock when they arrived. These can't both be true. He kept going. And if they disagree on the day Jesus was crucified, the day he was buried, the day he rose, those are essential details. If you can't trust those, you can't trust the story. The Christian shifted in his seat. My claim isn't that the Gospels are perfect or completely aligned on every detail, just that they're all likely written about an event they experienced, and the general details are probably true. The Muslim leaned in. Would you agree that what you just said is the definition of conjecture? The Christian paused. How so? You're assuming these events may be true. Maybe. You're not certain. That's conjecture. That's exactly what the Quran says. The Christian didn't answer right away. The Muslim pressed. Does that affirm what the Quran says? That people claim things about the crucifixion but have no absolute proof, and they're only following conjecture? The Christian thought. I would say no, because I used to be certain, even if I'm not now. The Muslim didn't let it go. The Quran isn't talking about people's feelings. It's talking about reality. In reality, no one has proof. Absolute, verifiable, traceable proof. Do you agree with that? The Christian was quiet. Then he nodded. Yeah. And the Muslim sat back, because that was the round. But the Christian wasn't finished. He still believed. He just wasn't sure how to defend it anymore. So the Muslim did something unexpected. He opened the Bible. Let me show you something. There are verses in the Bible that actually contradict the crucifixion. The Christian raised an eyebrow. I'd love to see that. The Muslim smiled. Do you know the story where people ask Jesus for a sign and he says, "You'll get no sign except the sign of Jonah"? The Christian nodded. Yeah, he's referring to Jonah being in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Exactly. Jesus says, just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so will I be in the heart of the earth. Now, what was the sign of Jonah? What was the miracle? The Christian thought. He was swallowed by a fish and then spit out. But was Jonah dead or alive in the belly of the fish? The Christian saw it immediately. He was alive. Exactly. If Jonah had died, there's no miracle.
Any person swallowed by a whale would die. The miracle is that Jonah stayed alive. So when Jesus says, "Just as Jonah was in the belly, I will be in the earth," does that mean Jesus is saying he'll be dead or alive in the grave? The Christian hesitated. If you take it that way, then he's saying he'll be alive. The Muslim nodded. And that matches exactly what the Quran says, that Allah saved Jesus, kept him alive, didn't let him die on the cross. The Christian tried to counter, but couldn't the sign be that he came out of the fish, that he re-emerged? The Muslim shook his head. Jesus said, just as he was in the belly, not after the belly. He's talking about the state Jonah was in while inside, and Jonah was alive. The Christian sat back. He had no immediate answer. The Muslim wasn't done. Let me give you another one. Do you know Psalm 91? The Christian shook his head. It's quoted in the Gospel of Matthew. Satan tempts Jesus and quotes Psalm 91, which says God will protect Jesus, send angels to guard him, answer all his prayers, and save him from harm. The psalm says, "No harm will overtake you. He will rescue you. He will deliver you. He will give you long life." It's all about God protecting and saving Jesus. The Christian listened.
Now, did Jesus pray to be saved from the crucifixion? The Christian thought. He said, "Father, take this cup away from me." Exactly. The cup represents the crucifixion. Jesus prayed to be saved. And Psalm 91 says when Jesus calls on God, God will answer and save him. So was he saved? The Christian started to answer, then stopped. He also said, "Not my will, but yours." The Muslim nodded. True, but did he ask to be saved or not? He did ask. And Psalm 91 says God will answer, that God will protect him, that no harm will come to him, not even his foot striking a stone, let alone being stripped, beaten, and crucified. So if Psalm 91 is a prophecy about Jesus, and it says God will save him, then either God saved him, or the prophecy is false. The Christian was quiet. The Muslim pressed gently. And when Jesus was on the cross, what did he say? The Christian answered softly, "Why have you forsaken me?" Exactly. Which means he expected to be saved. And when he wasn't, according to the crucifixion story, he felt forsaken. But Psalm 91 says God wouldn't forsake him. So which is true? The Christian didn't answer. The Muslim let the silence sit, because the punch had already landed. One more thing. The Gospels can't even agree on when Jesus was crucified or when he rose. They give different days, and Jesus said he'd be in the